Greetings, pet lovers. Bridget here with First Street Pets, and today we're going to talk about stray dogs. My background is in animal sheltering. I started as a volunteer when I was 18 years old. I'm now going to be 50 this year, so it's been a long time. I worked my way up into working in shelters and being in management. I am now involved with a national nonprofit called Mission Reunite, which is focused on, you guessed it, finding lost pets. And over all those years, I have seen a lot of attitudes that I used to believe myself about stray animals. Now, our so-called conventional wisdom tells us that any animal we see, like a dog or a cat walking down the street without a person, is abandoned or dumped. And I believe these things, and so do most other people, because we don't know any different. How would we know where those animals come from? Most of the animals that are picked up and brought into shelters are assumed to have been abandoned because the owner never comes forward, right? So that conclusion is drawn. The problem is that these are just beliefs. These don't have any basis in fact. And so that may not seem harmful, but what you believe does affect your attitude and your actions. So if you really believe that these animals are abandoned and dumped, you won't make an effort to look for the owner. You will quickly move to save or rehome the animal. You'll hear a lot of this in the humane communities where animals are being rehomed. As I mentioned in my recent video on using Craigslist to find a lost pet, people find animals and they're posting them on Craigslist, trying to find a new home for them. They're not looking for the owner. So what we believe is really important, and here's why. So let's talk about the court of social media. And you'll see this in criminal trials where they call it the court of public opinion and so forth, where we have tried and convicted someone based on our opinions because we don't like the way the person looks or the way they talk or whatever without knowing any of the facts of the case. Go to literally any Facebook page where people list found pets and you will see this post in some version. Someone will post a picture of a pet and say that they found it, or they see it walking around in an area and needs to be helped. And inevitably, there will be many comments from people saying, look at that poor baby, those owners should be put in jail, and this and that. And immediately, people want to take the animal. You'll see comments from someone saying, I know somebody who wants a dog, I'll give it to them. So you just get this barrage of comments from people immediately making an assumption about an animal. They know nothing about the animal. They know nothing about where it came from, but they're making that assumption. Sometimes someone who knows better will try to be the voice of reason and will post saying, maybe you should see if someone is looking for that dog, or maybe you should scan for a chip to see if you can contact the owner. Very often that person will be shot down by everybody else. So it's the court of social media, and it's also kind of a mob rule, because more people have this false belief, they will shoot down the person who is being more skeptical and logical, saying, let's try to find the owner first and then think about rehoming if we're not able to find the owner. One comment that I see a lot is that folks don't deserve to have this pet back. Now, what does someone have to do to deserve to have a pet? That's what I want to know. Do they have to be wealthy? Do the pets always have to be neutered? Do they have to live in a certain area? What is it that lets them deserve their pet back? Everybody lives different ways, lives in different places. If they love their pets and provide care for them, who is anyone to judge? Even the animal control authorities legally have very little that they can hold over an owner. As long as an owner complies with the law and provides for their animals and keeps them on their property and licenses dogs and so forth, they're not going to take animals away from people. A, because they're not breaking any law, and B, because why would you want to take those animals into an already crowded animal shelter system? Millions and millions of dogs and cats enter U.S. animal shelters every year. So the goal is to get them back to their owners as quickly as possible and hopefully keep them there in their homes where they belong so that the shelters and rescues can provide for animals that actually do need a new home, where the owners cannot be found, or perhaps the owner has passed away, or the owner has needed to give up their pet for one reason or another. So there's no point in saying that someone doesn't deserve a pet or it should be taken away from them when those pets are doing fine in the homes that they have, and there are millions of other pets who do need a new home. So what happens to stray dogs in a shelter? Well, they're all slightly different, but the system is basically the same. If a dog is picked up by an animal control officer or brought in by someone as a stray, the shelter will give the dog vaccines and whatnot, give them an initial health exam. They will scan the dog for a microchip and check for the registration. Now, unfortunately, as I've talked about in my microchipping videos, as many as 50% of microchips are not correctly registered. So this is really super frustrating for shelters because the owners may have gotten the chip and they think that they're protected, but if it's not registered or not currently registered, there's nothing the shelter can do to get a hold of them. Sometimes if the folks at the shelter have time, they can do a deeper dive and try to get more information on a chip past that initial phone call to the microchip registry. There is an organization called Microchip Hunters, which I will link in the description. It's a really cool volunteer group, and they do provide this type of assistance. They utilize volunteers who work from home, who have the time to really deep dive, and they have been really successful at finding owners at chips that were registered many years ago and the information isn't current, or the pet was given away and they don't remember who they gave it to. So they've been a really big help in that. But unfortunately, many shelters are minimally staffed, especially now due to COVID restrictions. And so they just don't have time to spend that much time on individual microchips. If there is a chip that is registered, or there's an ID tag or a license tag or anything like that, the shelter staff will make attempts to contact the owner by phone, by email if they have it, and also by sending letters if they have an address. So this will all be done that first day, so hopefully the owner can come down and pick them up. And then the animal will be kenneled and held in waiting for the owner. Today, most shelters post pictures and descriptions of animals online, which is super helpful. This is what we tell people all the time to, if you don't necessarily have time to go to the shelter right away or to go there every day, you can look at the listings on their website and see what dogs and cats have been picked up in the last 24 hours. Unfortunately, some shelters still don't do this, which is shocking because it takes literally seconds to take a picture and plug it into your kennel software. So there's no excuse for that, and hopefully that's something that will change in the coming year. So what happens to a stray dog if the finder doesn't take it to a shelter? Well, there are some non-shelter alternatives, which have actually kind of been in the mainstream in the last 6 months because of the COVID restrictions. Many shelters were closed when this thing first hit. They didn't know what to do. They didn't want to let the public in. Everybody was afraid. Now there's a little bit more staffing, a little bit more activity, usually done by appointment with a limited amount of people in the building and etc. But at least initially, shelters were asking folks who found a dog to keep it at their home and simply provide them with information so they could post it on the website. Now, some people may opt to do this anyway because maybe they want to keep the dog if they can't find the owner, or maybe they don't want to go to the shelter for whatever reason. Maybe they're afraid the dog will be put down, or they just don't want to see it in a kennel. So there's a number of reasons why someone may keep a dog at their home. Now, the important thing is they should get them checked for a microchip. And most vets will do that, or you can have it done at the shelter, even if you're not dropping the pet off. Also, a lot of rescue groups, TNR groups, and whatnot will have a microchip scanner. Now, I have a chip scanner, and I was able to assist a friend who found a dog at her home. Now, she's in kind of an isolated area up on the mountain. She found a really nice, friendly dog. I scanned the dog. We got the chip number. The chip company contacted the owner, got the two of them on the phone. Dog was back home in an hour. So that's how the system should work. So if you are hanging on to a stray pet and there is no chip, you don't really have owner info, you want to do all your due diligence to look for that owner. This is the right thing to do, of course, and it's also required by law in most states that if, let's say, you decide to keep this animal because you don't find the owner and the owner comes forward a year later, well, you should give the pet back anyway, but legally you would be required to if you can't show any proof that you did your due diligence in looking for them. So some of the things you can do are, of course, reporting the pet found to the shelter, posting on social media, posting on Craigslist, on your local next door and things like that, getting that information out. Now, when someone calls you to claim their pet, there's nothing wrong with asking for some information or proof of ownership, like a picture. Most people have pictures in their phone of their pet. They can send it to you, no problem. They might have a vet bill, a license record, something like that. But what you don't want to do is judge. I unfortunately see this a lot with people asking, how come your dog isn't neutered? Or maybe he needs to be groomed or something. I mean, it's not your pet. There's nothing wrong with giving a little helpful advice. If the animal really is in bad shape and needs medical attention, then you should take them to a vet or you should contact animal control and get them involved, because it's not up to you to tell the owner what to do. That's only if there's a very real problem. Now, you also have to remember the dog could have been out loose for months, because dogs really can survive like that. We've seen some that were running around loose for months or even years. There are groups of volunteer dog trappers who try to catch these dogs and rehabilitate them. And if they don't find an owner, they try to rehome them. So they can look pretty bad after a while, surviving on what they find in dumpsters, especially if they're a dog with hair that needs to be brushed and groomed. So just think about what you say before you say it. It's okay to be helpful, but be kind, and it's not your pet. Just give it back to the owner. This is a super common question that we hear all the time. How long do I have to wait before I can keep the dog? And unfortunately, there's no solid answer on this one. I live in California and the laws around this are super vague. They're really clear for animal shelters with a certain amount of days that the animal has to be held if it does or doesn't have ID and etc. Most shelters will hold a little past that to try to find the owner. But those laws are based upon laws that were created 150 years ago with the goal of rolling animals in and out of the shelter quickly. So that doesn't really apply to today. And thankfully, things are changing as shelters become more proactive and more community-based rather than the kennel shelter model. But you as a citizen wanting to keep a pet, there is no really clear number. So what most people will do is do everything they can to find an owner, as I mentioned, keep records of all that so you can prove that you did try to find the owner. And usually after a month or two, they can safely believe that the pet now belongs to them. But just keeping in mind that the owner may come forward later than that, and you're going to have to decide what to do. Sometimes owners are out of the country and they don't even know the pet's missing. The person looking after the house for them doesn't tell them. This actually happens, believe it or not. Sometimes people are in the hospital. I've dealt with people who've been in car accidents. So they're in the hospital. They don't know what's going on at all because they're injured or they're in surgery. And by the time they get out, they don't even know where to start looking for their dog who was in the car with them at the time of the accident. So there are a lot of different scenarios. So just do your due diligence, keep your records, and do the right thing. So how do we prove that found dogs are not abandoned, dumped, or unwanted? Actually, we don't have to. You can't prove a negative. This is a logical fallacy called burden of proof. I love that website called Your Logical Fallacy Is. Check it out. We've all been guilty of engaging in some of these logical fallacies. Now, according to the burden of proof lies with someone who is making a claim and is not upon anyone else to disprove. The inability or disinclination to disprove a claim does not render that claim valid, nor give it any credence whatsoever, and it goes on from there. But what that means is that we don't have to prove this. We don't know what the answer is. So we need to do the right thing, assume, just for the good of humanity, that a found dog or cat is owned by a family, is loved, and they want them back. Make all efforts to find that family and get them back home, and then go from there. If you can't, then proceed with rescuing, rehoming, and adoption. There are many possibilities that we aren't even aware of. For example, someone pushing a dog out of a car door, which is what people report sometimes, could be a dog-hating neighbor. It could be a stalking ex of the owner of the dog. It could be literally anyone. You don't know that that was the owner taking the dog out and abandoning it. A dog sitting alongside the road or wandering alongside the road could have wandered from home and gotten lost, or could have been in a car accident, or could have jumped from a moving vehicle. All of these things have actually happened. So again, when a dog is seen alongside the road, it's simply assumed that they were abandoned there, but there's so many other possibilities. Thank you for watching today's video. Please check out my other videos on lost pet recovery. I will be uploading a couple more this week on different topics, including keeping your senior pet safe and cat personalities. If you hit the notification bell on your subscription, you will be notified as soon as those videos come out so you can watch them right away.